Hey, it's Jeremy from Jeremy.net, and I'm back working on another piece. I probably should start scheduling live streams and give you guys a heads up as to when I'm going to be on. But right now, I'm just sort of streaming whenever I'm on my computer working on a piece. Sometimes I'm working on my laptop, sometimes I'm working here. So eventually, I'll try to set up a schedule where I'm doing it maybe once a month, maybe twice a month, and try to post regularly and give you guys some advance notice. And right now, I am working on the same piece I was working on before. This banner from Morningstar. I've pretty much finished all of the figure work, as much detail as I'm going to put in. I may still touch up the jacket a little bit because it looks kind of rough. But I'm starting to work on the wings here, and I'm really just going to add detail on the areas of the wings closest to the figure, and then once I get out to the edges, I'm going to let them fade into very simple shapes, almost more abstract, kind of like the way that the background's handled. So I'm going to see if I can get through that, and maybe tomorrow I'll get around to doing some color work, and if I'm working on it tomorrow, I'll stream again. Hmm. Hey Aaron, hey Healthy Foods. Thanks for joining me. I'm working on a digital painting. Hope you guys are having a good weekend. American Swordfish. Hey, how's it going? Just I do have the chat pulled up on the side, so if you guys ask me any questions and I don't answer right away, just repeat it and let me know, because I'm sort of like watching the screen, painting, work on this, and every once in a while I kind of look over and see if there's anything going on over there. So I'm kind of half in, half out, trying to split the difference between paying attention and focusing on actually, working on the painting. Hey Baxter, you are more than welcome. Glad you've been enjoying all the videos and the comics work. I'm doing well. You know, just cranking away on a piece here. I wish that I were drawing something more interesting, but really I'm just trying to get the feathers on these wings the way I like them. And because as much as I draw these wings in ink, doing it as more of a digital painting, I'm still figuring out exactly how I want them to look. So it's sort of like a lot of it is just me sort of brushing in brush strokes, brushing them out, trying to find the way that I like, you know, the way I want them to look. American Swordfish, are you, what are you drawing? What are you working on? Yeah, you know what's funny about being dedicated to something? It's not easy to have as much dedication to artwork as I've been putting in, but it comes from the fact of the genuine love and passion for it. I mean, anything that you don't particularly care about, you're not going to spend hours and hours upon, you know, working at it. So I feel like the main thing that I've always wanted to show in all the videos I show is just, it's more like letting you guys join me on the ride. It's not like I'm necessarily trying to teach any grand lessons about making art or making comics. It's more just sort of like, you know, it's got its good days and its bad days. There's stuff that you do well, stuff that you need to continually practice and work on, and just sharing that entire journey. I mean, every artist is going to have a different path when they work, whether it's making comics, painting, whatever type of art that they're doing. But it can still be informative when you see what other people's paths are and the creative decisions they make or how they go about their day-to-day of making things, because it may give you ideas about what stuff you want to try, or it may make you say, wow, I really don't want to do this particular thing. So, yeah, I see you're a writer, Baxter V. Or Baxter 5, not sure how, probably it's Baxter 5. But regardless, you know what, I'm really glad that the writing tutorial helped. At some point, probably after my next big project after I finish Morningstar, is to create a book. I've mentioned it on this channel before. As I plan to make a book out of that tutorial and then add a lot more of my thumbnails and layout process from Morningstar to the book to kind of share, you know, I wanted to have something that's worthwhile for people who have already seen the videos. So I wanted to take the structure that's in that in those videos, and along with put them into a book, say, all right, this is how I actually practiced these things that I'm talking about. You know, you can showing a ton of my thumbnails and how I'm working out how my outline breaks down on a page-by-page basis. I mean, in the video, I did put examples, but it's more sort of like, here's one quick example of what I'm talking about, whereas just showing the whole process as I go. Yeah, please give me some advice. I mean, if the book is going to be for writers and other, you know, creators, it's important for me to know what you do want to see and what you don't want to see. Yes, please give me advice on the book. Oh, keeping it short and to the point. Yeah, that's definitely something that I prefer in books too, is not necessarily rambling on and on. In fact, it's going to pretty much be clearly broken into two sections. The first section really is just going to be um, the content of the video, like the slideshow from that lecture, that tutorial broken into book format, so it's going to be reformatted. And then the second half is going to be just visual content. Well, not just visual, but showing the actual thumbnails that I used from several pages of Morningstar, showing layouts. So it's almost like just saying, all right, if you really enjoyed the main part, then here's just more of you seeing different variations of that. So the second half of it is going to be more of just additional information for those that want to see multiple examples. But you know what? If there's if there's other things that I haven't thought of, if there were questions that you had that the video didn't answer, then please let me know, because it's entirely possible that there are things I didn't cover in that video. And I mean, I have people that have reached out to me with questions. If it's something that I know and I'm capable of teaching and putting into the book, then I will. But if it's, so yeah, please let me know if there's other things that you'd like to see, or even, I guess I'm trying to have a hard way of phrasing what I'm looking for, because it's almost like one of those unknown unknowns, because I'm not sure what other things. The main thing I thought of was just showing these extra thumbnails, but I wasn't sure what else other people would want to see. And I think I posted a video a while back saying, what do you want to see in a book on comic book writing, or outlining, because that's really the thrust of the book, is outlining. Oh, yeah, well, you know what's funny about, when you say you're not a comic book writer, most of the stuff that the resources I go to for learning about the craft of writing, I listen to John August and Craig Mazin's podcast on screenwriting called Script Notes. I also listen to StoryGrid. It's a podcast. What is the name? Tim Grahl. Tim Grahl and Sean Coyne. Sean Coyne is Stephen Pressfield's book editor. Stephen Pressfield's the guy who wrote War of Art, and Tim Grahl had written a book called, I think, Your First 1,000 Copies, about marketing and selling books, and I had bought that separately. Then I found out later on that they had actually worked together, and I can't remember whether it was that that Tim had worked on book marketing for Sean Coyne's book called The Story Grid, which, it's sort of that's what it says. It's about laying out your story on a grid. It's about story structure. It's about deep outlining. So it's very similar to what I'm thinking of in doing specifically for comics. But I listen to, they have a podcast as well as the Story Grid blog. There's another podcast I listen to called The Creative Pen by a British thriller writer named Joanna Penn. They always say that for artists shouldn't just look at other comic book artists in order to learn how to write, and in order to tell stories and how to draw. You should look at fine art, all other areas of art, learn things from traditional art in general, and bring those things back to your comic work. And writing's kind of the same way, because when I've looked into podcasts, most of the podcasts I looked at about prose writing tend to be focusing a lot on just theme, but they don't really get into story structure and story mechanics. Whereas screenwriting podcasts, that's all they talk about is story structure. I mean, no, they get into a lot of character, dialogue, how to move things through a scene. But, and I'll get back. I see the other questions that you've got there. Let me just wrap up the thought I had here. Screenwriters go through all of the different aspects of writing, but there's a lot of aspects that they discuss that are very specifically germane to comic book writing, which is another visual storytelling medium. I mean, you're still telling a story, but you're telling it with pictures. And, some people bristle at making too many comparisons between film and comics, but there are a lot, and I find it very useful to listen to the kind of conversations screenwriters have about the writing craft as opposed to pretty much any other form of writing. Let's see. When I was writing Morningstar, how long did it take? And did I scrap stuff along the way? Wow. Okay, well that's a big question, because on one hand, I actually started writing... Morningstar started out as a short story that I wrote in the late 90s. So that's, quite a long while ago, and the story has evolved a lot in the time since, in the interim. But when I sat down to write the particular version that I'm doing now that I've been publishing as a comic, first off, I tend to always be writing to some degree, in the sense that while I'm working on Morningstar, I'm already thinking about the comic that I'm going to do after Morningstar. And when I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking more in general terms, just story structure, thinking about the characters, plot points, different directions it could go. So I'm kind of like loosely outlining like my main themes. I'm kind of always working on that in the back of my mind while I'm drawing the current project I'm working on. So when I was doing my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods, I was already spending a lot of time thinking about Morningstar. In fact, I did Eye of the Gods first because I had already had Morningstar as a story in my head, but I knew I wasn't a good enough writer to tell the story in Morningstar at the time that I started working on my first comic. So I wanted something a little bit easier, fewer characters. That was the big thing. Eye of the Gods really only has 4 main characters. There's a few others, but it streamlined it. Whereas with Morningstar, there's 7 main characters. And oh, I see Vince Moore popped in there. What's up, Vince? How you doing? Yes, and I completely agree. Comics, is a mix of literary, artistic, and cinematic. I'd like to think that comics take the best of all of those things and combine them. But in terms of, back to the other question that Baxter V had, in terms of how long it took me to write Morningstar and how much stuff I scrapped a whole lot. It probably took me, I want to say, once I sat down to really write my outline, that probably took me about 3 or 4 months to outline the 8-issue series. But what was interesting is that when I got to about issue 4, what I would do is I would do a pretty detailed outline of the whole series. But when I think I did a detailed outline of the first 4 issues. And then after that, I had sort of like my paragraph outlines of the last 8 issue, but didn't go into my page-by-page outlines. And I came to regret that, because by the time I got to issue 4, I realized that there were a lot of problems I hadn't worked out. And so I went back and I re-outlined the entire rest of the series. I probably stopped in the middle of the story, and there was a big gap between issue 4 and issue 5, time-wise, because I went back and I rewrote my outlines for issue 5 through 8. And that time I went all the way down to my page-by-page breakdowns. I really wanted to work out all of the beats and the plot points. And part of that is that after I had written Eye of the Gods, I thought, all right, I've kind of got my first comic under my belt. I feel like I have a sense of what I'm doing. So in this next comic, I was going to do just my couple of paragraph outlines for each issue, and then I was going to write my page-by-page outline as I went. And it turned out that just did not work for me. And I'm not saying that does not work for comic creators. I think many comic creators are forced, just by virtue of the monthly schedule that they try to keep up, to they're forced to write in a kind of more of an on-the-fly, working issue by issue, and then just having a general idea of how the whole story arc is going. But for me, the 2 times that I've tried it, I have not been happy with the results. And, at some point, I probably will come back and try writing an issue by issue or chapter by chapter story sometime again in the future. because I don't have anything against writing by the seat of your pants. They have the whole conversation about pantsers versus plotters. Pantsers making up everything as they go along and letting the story surprise them. Plotters working out every detail as they go. Some people feel super restricted by having to work from an outline. I have found that I do not find myself restricted, and I'm much happier with the results. So I am very big into outlining, but I am also very big into everyone figuring out what works out for them. It would be really unfair of me to simply say, never write a story without an outline, because some people do get great results from it. I just feel like it doesn't work for me, and I know people who know that they need an outline, but they just don't enjoy the process. And that's what, like you said with the video, yeah, okay, good. We're on the same page. It's probably, I see Baxter V, you'd be a plotter, and that's probably why you enjoyed the video that I made. Because the whole thrust of that video wasn't necessarily just how to write an outline, but also it was more of like how to not make outlining a pain in the ass and how to make it a more pleasurable process. Because I know a lot of people who hate outlining and they just don't enjoy the process. Whereas for me, outlining is the funnest part of the story. It's where I'm like really putting in the building blocks. And I thought maybe by showing how I do it, it might make people who really didn't enjoy it, it might just make it less painful for them. So they're like, well, if I got to do it, at least I can do it in a fast, efficient way that I enjoy. Oh, you're putting 2,000 words on paper before you even start writing? Well, you know what? That's a good idea. I will tell you something interesting is that even though I very much believe in outlining, part of my outline for the two books I've published so far, Morningstar and Eye of the Gods, for both of those, I had a similar thing where, and this comes back to you asking how much I scrapped, where I not only scrapped writing, but scrapped artwork. For Eye of the Gods, I think I had drawn probably about 30 to 35 pages of the story before I realized that the rest of the story wasn't working, went back, worked out that more detailed outline, and then started the story over again. And with Morningstar, I didn't throw away any actual pages that I drew, but like I said, I started with a short story that I wrote back in the 90s, which, yeah, at some point I'll probably put that in a book just to share with people. Who knows, maybe I'll put it in the collected edition of the second version of Morningstar. Yeah, 20,000 words is a lot. That's really impressive. Good going, man. You know what's funny is being somebody who just works in comics, I've never even thought to check what my word count is for my comic outlines. So I still think in terms of pages, even though I know that most prose writers tend to, it really comes down to word count as opposed to page count. I think that's something that screenwriters, again, making comparisons between comics and screenwriters, the screenplays tend to think in terms of page count, but that's also because, you know, there's that old standby of generally 1 page of a screenplay equaling 1 minute of screen time. I don't necessarily, you know, with comics, it really just depends on how much dialogue and how much action you have, because you might end up having 1 page that's like a splash page. So that one whole page may just be 2 sentences. Or you could have something where you've got 1 page that has, like, you probably shouldn't have more than a page of dialogue for a comic book page, but you could have, you know, dialogue, depending on how much the characters are talking, take up a lot of page space. So I don't know if word count really, that's the main reason why I don't necessarily think about word count. But I do know that's the big benchmark that prose writers tend to use. So congratulations. Oh, Baxter, you say you've got a story that's got a clear direction to it, one that you do want to tell in comics. Well, I definitely I like the idea of people who work in a particular medium saying I'm open to trying stories in all kinds of mediums and just seeing where it works best. The mystery writer Patricia Highsmith actually used to write comics, and I think that she was actually a little bit embarrassed by it. Obviously there's not really any stigma to comics these days. I mean, so many people read comics, enjoy comic book movies. But, a lot of great writers out there that write comics. I mean, Michael Chabon from Cavalier and Clay. I mean, obviously it makes sense that he would write comics, being that the book was inspired by the creators of Superman. So, but yeah, it's good that you're open to trying stories in different mediums. I'm looking at this wing and I'm just realizing I have to find a simpler way to paint these because I'm just spending way too much time noodling here. And it's going to take me forever if I keep doing it the way I'm doing it right now. I'm tempted to go in here and just paint the whole thing out into the darkest tone and then just paint lighter and lighter as I go. What's coming after Morningstar? Well, it'll probably take me. Here's the thing. I really think that the book on writing, I could do it in 3 months if I were really, really focused, since I've already got a lot of the written content ready. So it's really going to be a lot of formatting. But knowing myself and just how day to day gets in the way in the day job, I guess it'll probably take me 6 months to finish Morningstar. After that, I have a book on figure drawing. It's not an educational book. It's just a collection of my figure drawing work that I also share on my channel. For that, I've just had tons of drawings piling up. It's just a matter of putting them in a book format. So I'm going to do that book. After that, I have plans for a sequel to Eye of the Gods. But I also have a political thriller that's popped into my head that I'm really excited about. And a young adult fantasy story. And I kind of go back and forth between all three of those things in terms of which one I'm going to do next. But what I'm probably going to do is be writing that in the background while I spend some time just doing a bunch of standalone art pieces. Probably kind of just to have a bunch of new art prints for doing conventions and stuff to sell as canvas prints. And I plan to start selling originals, like just original ink drawings online. And eventually, if that can become enough of a profitable business, I can kind of shift into doing more of that, and then hopefully have a little bit more spare time that isn't eaten up by work that I can do to put towards comics. So I've got 3 comics on deck mentally, plus the figure drawing book and the outlining book. So that's probably what's next. I'm really having a hard time figuring out what I want to do with these wings. It shouldn't be this complicated. Yeah, I'm just noodling too much. Well, never let it be said I was afraid to make bold decisions. Let's just lasso all of this. and just fill, and we will go from there. All right. I start by cleaning up the edges down here. Now, come to think of it, even making this cleaned up and ragged, I think that these feathers are probably bigger than smaller than they should be. Give it the wing a little bit more mass, and then I don't have to noodle as much with drawing all these tiny little detailed things. Sometimes a lot of the hard work of drawing is just making decisions on what to take away instead of what to add. I mean, some people really do love hyper detailed artists and, like, you know, the Jim Lee look with a lot of like rendering and hatching. I don't think that I'm anywhere near as good as Alex Toth, but Alex Toth is probably closer to what I aim for. Like kind of I'm aiming for more of a minimalist, but not cartooned just to this, not to the point of abstract. More like, what is the minimum I need to tell the story I'm trying to tell visually, and trying to not do more than that. I haven't gotten the Brush with Genius book, but oh wait, no, I think Brush with Genius is Dave Stevens, but I think that there is a Genius is in the title of the Alex Toth book. But I do have the Alex Toth Doodle book, and there was a publisher that put out a bunch of small art books. They're just collections of his comic work. I've got some of those I like to look at. Ideas having to do with philosophy. You know, it's funny. I think that philosophy is interesting to a lot of artists in the sense that it's the study of thought, and in a way, and art, in my opinion, is the expression of thought. I think of art as a vessel for telepathy, whether it be music, television, theater. It's a way of taking what's in our hearts and our minds and expressing it to another person. Although that said, I have found that the study of philosophy can be a little labyrinthian for me. Like, I took a couple of philosophy classes when I was in college, and the first couple of ones were interesting, but, well, not the first couple of classes. I would say actually the first couple of weeks of the class I did take were interesting. But after that, it really started getting labyrinthian, and it seemed a lot more like mathematical equations. It was an intro to philosophy class, but it wasn't actually about reading different philosophical texts. It was more sort of just like breaking down different logic problems. And I kind of fell out of interest in it. Let's see here. Vince, as a solo creator, what systems do I use to help me make creative decisions? Since I'm usually working alone, I may not necessarily consult with anyone unless I absolutely must. Well, you know, it's funny because the idea of consulting alone, I mean, that's just simply the idea of just not consulting anyone. It's not that I don't necessarily want to consult with anyone. I have very much considered hiring an editor to work with in some of my comics, but also I believe that everyone deserves fair payment for their work, whether it be the writer, inker, letterer, colorist. I wouldn't want to have somebody doing work for me as a favor. I'd much rather them doing it and be able to just pay them a fair wage for what they do. And so right now, the main reason why I haven't looked into hiring an editor is simply budget. when I start selling enough comics that I'm doing decently and I can afford to hire an editor, I probably would work with a freelance editor for my comics. Both a developmental editor and a line editor. You know, because I definitely think it's useful to have that. That's actually one of the things that I think mainstream comics does benefit from, is having you know, some people don't like having too many cooks in the kitchen, and I think that it can be problematic. But if you have intelligent people giving you feedback, intelligent people giving intelligent feedback is very different from just having too many cooks in the kitchen. And I think that that is extremely beneficial to pretty much any creative process. But more further to the point of what processes do I use or tools do I use for planning, that video that I have that's on story outlining is kind of the big one. I have not used, or I have not actually applied the story grid to my work, although Vance, I know that's one that we both talked about, and when I saw that you had the book, I was super excited about it because I was really into the blog when I had first started reading it. And I felt like the story grid book itself, just in terms of the philosophies and the approach of breaking down and analyzing the positive and negative value shifts in your story and learning how to structure it so that the story is always moving forward, and that, you know, plot change versus emotional change, that they aren't, that how do you try and meld them into one and the same? It's not like you're only developing the plot or you're only developing the character. That plot and character should be intertwined to the point that it's, you know, that's, you know, it's almost invisible. Let's see. Oh yeah, the conversation we were having the other day. Well, I'm sorry. A lot of the conversation that we were having the other day was, in my mind, was a little bit obliterated by the conversation about sad bitches. But I was only overhearing bits and pieces of discussion about the story grid. Wait, hang on. Let me just read through a couple of the other comments here in the chat. Let me see. Sometimes. Oh yeah, just Baxter V. Sometimes I get a dilemma or something. You'll just be fighting with yourself over it. Well, this is an answer to both your and Vince's question about tools that I use. And this is also part of the story grid, because the very top level thing in the story grid was that the foolscap method, where you just sit down and you figure out what is your beginning, middle, and your end. For me, when I am working on any story, it doesn't matter whether it's a problem with the plot as a whole, the particular issue, or a particular page. I look at lists. I will make a list of 10 different possibilities. And this works for drawing as well, because there's times when I'm thinking, what kind of angle do I want, and what do I want to show in a scene? And I'll make a list of like as many. My general magic number is 10 for a list. And the reason for that is because the first 3 things you think of are going to be conventional. They're going to be the same way everyone would resolve a problem. If that's all you can think of, then yeah, then you kind of have to make do with that. But generally what I'll try to do is, if I'm trying to figure out a plot point and how do I want a character to deal with this issue, or what do I want to have next, I will make a list of 10 different possibilities. And the first 3 are usually very conventional. The next 3 will tend to be unconventional, but also not necessarily useful. It's almost like sort of a, I'm trying to think of like, almost absurdist, where I'm just trying to pick whatever comes out of my mind. Like sometimes you get something genius like Monty Python, but sometimes you can get absurdist stuff that's just blathering crap. And then usually the last 3 or 4 ideas are when I start coming up with stuff that I feel is unique, different ideas of ways to solve whatever the problem is and I'm trying to deal with. And usually it's one of those last few ones, those last 3 that I end up using when I'm trying to to solve a story or a visual problem. So a lot of times that's why I thumbnail shit like to death. Those thumbnails are the equivalent of me making a list. So I may take a pose or a part of a character page, either a character pose or just a scene in a comic page, and I will end up drawing 5, 6, 7, 10 different possibilities of it. And sometimes the possibilities are just, what happens if the character is looking slightly up as opposed to down? What happens if I raise the eye line here instead of there? What happens if I move this character from this side of the panel to that side of the panel? And I'll just sketch out all those different variations, because variations allow you to look at a lot of different options. And in fact, again, tying it back into screenwriting and film, one of the useful things in filmmaking, they say that the film is written 3 times. It's written on the screen. It's written by the screenwriter on the page. Then it's filmed, and that's a form of actually telling the story, because having other people participating in the creative process definitely changes it. Then the last time it is written is in editing. When you edit the story, that's the final time where you tweak, move things around. You can change things dramatically with music, with different types of cuts and inset shots. Sometimes you have to go back and do reshoots. And in my mind, making a list of all the different possibilities of the way that a picture, a comic book page, a scene, or a chapter in a story can play out is like pre-editing. It's almost as if you said, all right, what if you already shot all this footage? And you said, all right, let's edit the story to look this way. Let's edit this scene to be scary. Let's edit this scene to be funny. Let's edit this scene to have more action in it. Let's edit this scene to make it heartfelt. That's what thumbnailing and outlining is to me. It's pre-editing. You're sitting there and acting as if you've already created all of this material and said, all right, what is it that I actually want to say? And then you narrow that down by looking at all those different outlines, all those different possibilities. And once you've got that, then you can say, now I have a clear understanding of what I want. And now I'm going to go make just the stuff that I really do need. And that said, much as filmmakers often do reshoots, there has never been an issue of Morningstar, period, since I've been doing it. I mean, it's not like it's a long-running series. It's only 8 issues long, and I'm just working on issue 7 now. But I have, with every single issue, there's always been pages that I will redraw panels of. At least half the issues have whole pages that I've thrown out and started over again. So that'll show you, even with the editing, you still end up doing things that just didn't come out the way you thought they would. Some of those were poor planning and foresight. Some of those were me having better ideas after I was already done. Some of those were me trying to work quickly because I felt like the comic was taking too long for me to draw. So I wanted to try and move myself closer to the speed that a monthly comic artist would work on. And sometimes I constantly think about the fact that if I actually worked at the rate that a Marvel monthly artist worked at, even if I only got an hour or 2 here and there to draw each day, I would still be much more productive. But as I always say, I'm still learning the craft. I'm still learning how to do things and improve. And there's times when I try to work that quickly and it just comes out like garbage. And I need to go back and say, all right, I was missing reference here. I need to go back and shoot that reference. This, I just drew it really fast. And even if I drew and erased it 5 times, it's still not good. I need to go back and re-thumbnail this and find something better or find an alternative. There's all sorts of different factors of why I will go on and end up throwing out pages or parts of a page after I am quote-unquote done drawing and inking the issue. Let's see. All right, I'm just scanning back through some of the comments in the chat because I was rambling and drawing and not looking at the chat at all. Trying to come up with an original way to split 2 characters into their own deliberately. I can't really justify the uncle doing it. What is this sounds right? Oh, Baxter V, it sounds like you just came up with your own story solution, like, but while batting it around. You know, that's one of the good things that comes. Even though this isn't a collaboration, I've definitely found that, like, talking. Some people say don't tell people your stories until you're done, because once you tell it, you'll lose the motivation to not. You know, you'll lose the motivation to write it down. If you've told it, you've already gotten the pleasure of other people hearing it. But I definitely believe that talking your stories through out loud is a great way to find solutions to problem areas, and also to have problems pointed out to you that you weren't aware were there. And Vince, yeah, the Chaplin approach. You know what's funny is I've never actually watched the movie Chaplin. I know that there's documentaries on him. There's the Robert Downey Jr. movie. There's, obviously many books. But I am not anywhere near as versed in film history. I mean, see, that's the thing I love about talking to you, Vince, is that you're like the full-on professor. If there's a subject matter, you're a man who drinks both broadly and deeply. So, like, you always know, and I wish I could be more like that. You're a huge inspiration in that sense, because I always am like, I need to get some books on these subjects. I need to watch a film on this, a film on that, and just sit and drink stuff in, because having that cultural soup in your head is educational. It will help you avoid doing stories that are trite or making artistic decisions that one might think are innovative, and really it's like, nah, people were doing that in like the 1920s, so it's like you're not all that, not genius here. You know what? I just did all of these little pieces, and now I'm realizing I probably want them to round back up. This is what happens when I'm drawing and I don't look at my reference enough. Like, even that, I realize it shouldn't be hard edge on one and then curved on the other. It should be much more knife-like. Like up and then down, up and then down. I think I'm just going to come in here and paint all that out and do it again, which you're going to be like, what? You just sat there for like 10, 15 minutes doing that. That's a challenge of art. I mean, there's a point at which an artist is very confident in all of their brushstrokes, their line art, and all of their compositional decisions, and they just make the piece. But I definitely have much more of my layouts and my thumbnails are my visual version of outlining a story. But the same way that even with a strong outline, you have to leave room for yourself to find stuff on the page and in the scene, I will be making a piece and I'll just realize, I'm like, oh no, I have to paint this out completely. It's not working. It's not what I wanted. And I don't like wasting time, particularly when, basically, if I don't finish this piece this weekend, then it's not going to be ready for WonderCon, because as it is, the printer that I'm planning to use to make my new convention banner, it seems like they have pretty fast turnarounds, but I don't even know if they'll be able to get it done if I send it off like Sunday night or Monday. But even with that, I'll still what was I trying to say? I'm trying to formulate my thoughts a little bit better. This is the downside of talking while I'm painting, is that I become way less coherent. I don't necessarily think... I've already kind of made peace with the fact that I'm probably not going to have it ready for WonderCon. That's what this main thing is. I was going to have it done and have this as the new banner behind my booth. Even if I do finish it this weekend, it still may not be ready in time, but I figured that's kind of like my drop dead date for having it ready. And I just, it means I shouldn't waste time painting and repainting, but I'm also trying to make this the best piece possible, because it's going to be the big advertising for my artwork at conventions for the next few years, and I'm going to use it as the new cover for issue 5. Vince, the American Masters documentary on Chaplin. Is it, you know what, I have the PBS app on my Roku. I'm sure I can either watch it on PBS's website if they don't have it on YouTube, or because we don't have Hulu. We have on demand, and we've got Netflix. So I'm sure I'll be able to find it somewhere. PBS is pretty good about that. And Baxter V, I saw your comment about the Writing Through the Kids series. I just didn't think of interesting question to ask you about it, and it's one of those things where I'm going back and forth now in my mind. As I'm working on this, I'm like, oh wait, let me fix this, let me fix that. So sometimes I am slightly tuning out of the chat a little bit, only because I'm like, wait, let me fix this thing here and fix this thing there, and then I sort of come back and focus in again. So I'm here, but I'm not 100% here. But obviously, writers and artists know what that's like, because we're always a little bit in that creative mental headspace where we're slightly disconnected because our brain is trying to solve some creative problem. All right, let's try this again now. Let's say now. Right? But I'm making the exact same mistake I made last time, which is... wait, maybe the answer is to do it. You know what's interesting, though, is these are more rounded and knife-like. This one is knife-like, but still a little bit close to what I was doing before. So maybe the best way to silhouette this is to do like this, but let that be the place where the shape splits. So maybe on this side, it rounds down a little bit. On that side, it rounds down a lot more. Down a little bit, and then a lot. Yeah, that might work. Let's try this. All right. It does feel silly to sit there and draw and redraw this. I feel like I could imagine really experienced digital painters watching me and just pulling their teeth out, pulling their hair out, like, why are you doing it like that? It's so slow. It'd be much easier if you just did A, B, and C. Yeah, I get self-conscious, just like a lot of other artists. I just tend to be willing to... You know what it is that I am willing to be publicly humiliated creatively. If I put artwork out there and it doesn't come out well, I'm like, all right, well, I gave it a shot. Whereas I think most creative people are like, I do not want people to see something until I have perfected my process and I know exactly what I'm doing. But I guess I'm willing to fail in public in order to get to some sort of success. And I don't mean like creative, like business, financial success. I mean just doing a single art piece that doesn't suck. That's what I mean when I say success. In the hopes that getting to a success in public may also be useful to other people in seeing all of the false steps and the missteps and the mistakes that I make getting to that thing that people actually say, oh, that's a good piece of artwork. I think most creative people have that thing where we feel like anything we do that's good, there's so many mistakes that we always feel like we should be. What was the quote that Michelangelo had? People. Now I don't think I'm a genius, but Michelangelo, who is a genius, said people would not think I was a genius if they saw how much effort I put into a piece in order to get the results that I got, which was a sentiment that I heard echoed almost exactly by the contemporary painter Cesar Santos. I'm subscribed to his YouTube channel. He's much more of a traditional realist painter. I believe he studied at the Angel Academy in Florence. Is he a Spanish? I can't remember if he's Spanish or Cuban, and I think the only reason why I might even think he's Cuban is because he lives in Miami. But I think I believe he's a Spanish artist, and his draftsmanship is just this incredibly beautiful classical drawing. He's got like a DVD series he's done teaching realist painting. He's much more of the Atelier school of traditional classical representational art, and I believe I heard him in one of a video that he did that he collaborated on Proco's YouTube channel, where they were going through his sketchbook and talking about his processes and all the stuff that he studied, and he kind of said the same thing where he feels like, yeah, I'm doing all this study, but if compared to how much time and work I'm putting into this, I feel like I should be better for how much time I put in. And like American Swordfish, like you said, yeah, it's true. I think everything that comes out well creatively, there is stuff that can come quickly, but it's much more like I think a story I once heard where someone, I don't know why anyone would complain about a sketch from Sergio Aragonés. Well, they weren't complaining about the sketch, but I heard that at a convention he went and did a sketch for someone, and it was just like a 2 or 3 minute sketch, and it was like $200 or something, which for it might not have been Aragonés, so I shouldn't put words in his mouth, but a comic creator was doing a sketch for someone. They were a well-known, well-established creator who was a cartoonist, and they did the sketch very, very quickly, but it was like a $200 sketch or more. And the person was kind of balked at the price, like, yeah, but it only took you like, 2 or 3 minutes to do that. And he's like, well, you're not paying for the sketch. You're paying for all the years it took me to be able to make this quality of artwork in that level of time. And there's also a podcast I was listening to, and I can't remember because I listen to a shit ton of podcasts. So I apologize for not being able to quote them exactly. But there's like somebody who got a bill from a plumber for like, he had a clogged pipe, and calls the plumber over. The plumber looks underneath, looks at it, then grabs a wrench and bangs on the pipe a couple of times, and the water just flushes down, and he gives him a bill for like $500. The guy's like, screw that. It's like, how? He's like, I think he demanded an itemized bill, like, how is this worth $500? And then, oh no, he pounds on the pipe with a hammer. And the itemized bill says, pounding on a pipe with a hammer, $5. Knowing the right spot to hit the hammer, $495. And that's kind of the thing with art, is that unless you are a bona fide genius, which bona fide geniuses, genii, do exist, but unless you are a genius, for the most part, you're going to have to do this stuff over and over again with trial and error and figure stuff out. Like a lot of, from what I've heard from writers, prose writers, that each book that they write is a different problem-solving exercise. So it's almost like they can't really they can use their approach to solving problems, but the story structure is going to be different each time, the characters are different each time, and they feel like each time they do a piece, when they start, they feel like they're starting from scratch. I've heard that from many writers. And for making any art, there's a degree to which when you start, each piece hopefully is a little bit better than the last because you have learned something, but you still have a lot of these problems you have to figure out and experiment and try over and over again. And then after decades of making artwork, you can go into it and say, oh, this is how to make this piece, and you can do, much higher quality work in a much shorter period of time because you've gone through all the iterations and you have the ability to pre-visualize a lot of those iterations ahead of time. Like for me, using reference to solve problems, it took me, I'm only now starting to use reference again because no one ever taught me how to properly use visual reference for drawing comics. And when I did try it, I found that I took way too long to produce work, and that I was doing way too much of just copying the reference, which I knew was not really the right approach. But now, having done it for a number of years, I'm finding ways in which I can, oddly enough, figure drawing is what has taught me how to use reference. Because I go to figure drawing classes once a month. I mean, not once a month, once a week. And in going to those classes and working from the human form and seeing when I copy the human form exactly and when I deviate and change things, it's that learning how to do that taught me that when I am working from reference, I can treat it the same way. And I don't think I would have figured that out had I not been, taking figure drawing for several years now. Alright, things have quieted down in the chat, so I think I'm going to log off for a little while because I can concentrate a little bit better. And then I will maybe log back on either later today or log on tomorrow so you guys can see the progress I've made. And yeah, talk to you guys later.